Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to MillerKnoll's Design Perspectives, January 2024. So Happy New Year, everyone. Design Perspectives is a monthly series where we talk about all things design. This could be creative design, it could be research and insights. But this month, we have the good fortune of featuring NaughtOne and Studio Marion. We've had great success in past design perspectives, highlighting different brands and their creative direction and what differentiates them, all of these brands living underneath the MillerKnoll umbrella. So this month, we have the good fortune of having Stephen Floyd, who is the creative director of NaughtOne, joining us, as well as Nicole Marion, who is an external designer with Studio Marion, and she is going to share some things about her studio, her design process, and recent collaboration with NaughtOne. We will have Q&A at the end of the session, so please put your questions in chat, and I'll give those questions to Stephen and Nicole at the end of their presentation. So without further ado, Stephen, I will hand it over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Stephen Floyd. I am the creative director for NaughtOne, and I am joining you today from our showroom in London. So if you don't know anything about NaughtOne, I want to share with you a little bit about the brand, what we've been up to, what we're doing next, and a little story about how we came to work with Nicole. So NaughtOne, we were established in 2005. We are a fairly young brand, and we design and manufacture ancillary furniture for all types of commercial spaces. NaughtOne is headquartered in a small town in North Yorkshire called Harrogate, which is in northern England. It's a super charming town. I've been there all week. It's lovely. North Yorkshire has a rich history in the textile industry, which means you can get the talent and upholstery expertise needed to create and produce high quality upholstered furniture. You can go to the next slide, Evelyn. We are known for our broad finish palette. Our color palette is based on the RAL color system, and 17 of those colors make up our standard palette. So depending on how you apply those finishes and what textile you select, our products can take on many different looks and characters, hence the idea of absolute simplicity, infinite possibility. As a brand, we are in a state of rapid growth and change. We recently launched our new branding, which hopefully many of you saw come to life for the first time during MillerKnoll Design Days in Chicago. In that space, you would have seen some of our most recent product introductions that included the launch of our Pippin chair designed by Lucy Carine, the Morse table system designed by John Tree, and our first preview of Percy. I think the idea of infinite possibility doesn't just mean choice of color or textile, it also means choice of character, which is why we really value our partnership with our external designers. They really help us build that portfolio of differentiated product. For me, I think working with our external designers is like working with a painter or a sculptor. I feel like each designer is an artist with a unique hand or aesthetic point of view that really help us create different products with differing and unique characters. Percy is a great example of a product that has a unique character that is perfect for NaughtOne because it takes full advantage of our RAL palette and upholstery capabilities. So we aren't done. If you saw Design Days, we aren't done. We are just starting this journey, and we are continuing to work on some exciting new products. We are building tools that will make our products easier to specify and visualize, and we will continue to show up in exciting and beautiful ways. The image here is actually our beautiful new office in Harrogate that opened 3 weeks ago. And lastly, I guess I just want to share a little on our process and how I first met Nicole when we were working, when we are working with our design partners. We always start with a brief, one that clearly defines a problem. And then we try to pair that with that specific design brief with a designer that we think is best suited to solve that problem in a unique and artful way. However, our partnership with Nicole was slightly different because she had already designed and built a prototype of Percy. And even though like we never take product submissions, and it's extremely rare for us to consider adding anything to our product portfolio without a brief, when we saw Percy, we really loved it, and we thought it'd be a really great fit for us. When I started, which was almost 3 years ago now, we were kind of still in the midst of COVID, and with some luck, with everyone learning to connect digitally versus in person, we found each other through our kind of collective network. We met for the very first time over Teams. We got to know each other the best we could over Teams, I would say. And we spent some time talking about Percy. I will say Nicole was one of the first designers that I started working with at NaughtOne, and now 2 years later, it's really exciting for me to see Percy in the wild. Nicole is lovely and an absolute joy to work with, and I think you'll really enjoy hearing more about her journey with Percy. And thank you all. That's it for me.
Thank you, Stephen. That was really nice. I love working with you too. Thanks for the great introduction. All right, I'll share my screen here. All right, can everybody see that? I can't see anyone, so I won't know if you do or not. But I'm going to assume you can see this all.
Nicole, we can see it, so.
Okay, great. I'm hoping
in.
Can you see my cursor moving around? Because I like to point at things on my screen.
Yes, I see a little hand on the screen, so
Perfect.
yes.
Thank you.
Sure.
Well, thank you for joining. It's very exciting to be able to talk about Percy in this context. I have sat in on several of these design perspectives and found them really interesting, so I hope that I can talk about something that you're finding interesting as well. The Percy project, from waiting room to showroom, as Stephen mentioned, has been a bit of a journey. It's been, I actually designed this piece 4 years ago. I can get into the details of that, but it's taken a while to get to this point, and I couldn't be happier to be in this position right now to walk through it with you. I'll also be sort of starting with an introduction of who I am, where I'm from, and sort of my design background before getting into the details of the development of Percy. So I'm from Winnipeg, Manitoba in Canada. I'm not sure if many of you know that name. I feel that the Winnipeg Jets can take some credit for putting us on the map, but we're kind of in the middle of nowhere in a sense. This is a photograph taken at the Forks, which is a big landmark in Winnipeg. It's where the meeting of the two rivers, the Assiniboine and the Red, come together. It's a huge sort of landmark in the city. And this is a sign that was recently put up. My kids are in it. However, there's an extra kid in there I realized recently, but I don't know who that is. But they give you a scale of how large that sign is. In behind is the Canadian Museum of Human Rights, which was a really big project here in the city several years ago and is an attraction for people to come from all over the world. So you may have heard of Winnipeg, but where the heck is Winnipeg? Winnipeg is right in the center of North America. I actually read recently that North Dakota, a small town in North Dakota, can actually take credit for the real center, both longitudinally and latitudinally, whatever, however you say that. But we truly are right in the middle of Canada. For years, entering the city, you pass this sign and you miss it. You always kind of have to look out for it. But I've always kind of celebrated as we enter the dead center of the country. They've since put up much, I won't say better, they've put up a much more formal sign since then. But I tend to kind of like this one that kind of, you got to watch out for, or you're going to miss it. Winnipeg is in Manitoba. As I mentioned, Manitoba is one of the prairie provinces. So we are very flat here. You can see forever, there's such a, the horizon is just completely flat. On the top left here, you can see various thunderstorms happening at the same time, which I always find really beautiful. And then, we grow a lot of canola, different sort of plants light up and colorize the land throughout different times of the year. It's really beautiful. As I said, it's very, very flat. However, we do have a point in the city, which would be considered our highest point. I believe it's only maybe like 100 feet tall, I'm not sure. And the only reason it's there is actually because it used to be a garbage dump. It's a landfill site that they covered with grass, and now it serves as Toboggan Hill and a park. It's called Westview Park, but the city has cheekily named it Carbage Hill. And when I say the city, I actually mean the people of the city. I think because of our geographical location, we've got a really great art scene. It's very insular. So the art scene is insular because it's independent, but you have to really look beyond to sort of access different communities. And so at one point, this hill had been called Garbage Hill for many years. And then an artist actually went and constructed a Hollywood type sign up on the hill, and the city was not happy about it. So they took it down, but then they actually replaced it with their own version. So it was really nice to have sort of this spontaneous art piece turn into an actual real homage to this highest point in the city made out of garbage. It's very cold in the prairies. I think a lot of people know that. However, it also gets very hot. So we have very huge temperature swings here. We go from minus 35 degrees Celsius to plus 35 degrees Celsius. Also put that in Fahrenheit for our American people here. So there's huge temperature swings. So we have to be sort of an adaptable group of people. Getting through the summer is no problem. Getting through the winter could be a challenge, but there's also a lot of really beautiful moments when you embrace the snow and you embrace the cold and you kind of get out there. There are a lot of really sort of beautiful things about living in such a flat, extreme place. One of the wonderful things about the winter here in Winnipeg is the Forks Trail, which I have just mentioned. Sort of, it's a large meeting place, and every winter when the river freezes over, the city turns it into a huge 6 to 8 kilometer skating, biking, walking trail lined with people's remnants of Christmas trees from Christmas. And so it actually opens up a brand new part of the city. It's actually my favorite part of the city in the winter. Possibly of the whole year, actually. It's really beautiful down there. You really get to see the city from a different perspective. This is me and my sister walking through. This was during the pandemic. We're wearing masks outside, but it's minus 35, and we put on all our gear and went for a walk down through the river. This is a view from the Forks. It's a really lively place in the wintertime. You can see here, there's a big skating rink. This is where the path starts here and continues for several kilometers. It also kind of comes back in behind and goes down the Red River. If you look closely here, you can see sort of different sculptures popping up. You can see a few over here as well. So these are getting ready to move onto the river. Every year they offer a competition for designing warming huts. And so these warming huts are art pieces that get placed all over down the river and create these little moments for people who are skating and walking to stop and warm up a little bit, but to also just kind of like catch a glimpse of something that's really cool and unique. These are a couple examples of some of the warming huts that are on the river. This one last year on the far left was done by actually a good friend of mine, Tom Fougere, and a local artist named Wanda Coop. And it was a really big, massive, sort of a palace of snow and ice that was constructed over a series of weeks right on top of the river. And it was a really beautiful, beautiful piece, and so peaceful to walk through. And you really kind of start to feel the insulation that snow creates and really quieted the whole thing, even though you're right in the middle of the city. So my design background, I just wanted to go over a few things. I have an architecture background. My undergrad and my master's is both in architecture. I have designed a couple buildings, but what I love about the project, I should say theoretical buildings, certainly not real buildings. But what I love about the program is that it's so broad. It really opens your eyes to new ways of thinking. You start to see the world in different ways. And it really opens up a bunch of different avenues for designers to kind of go in any direction, not just architecture. So I'm just going to show you a couple sort of slides of these sort of moments that I've created within my projects. I've always kind of been drawn to color, to light, to reflection, to these sort of small scale moments that happen through a project. So In these, just kind of playing with colored pieces of acrylic and how they start to overlap and play on the snow when they're reflected. And then the bottom image here, just sort of the idea of playing with these varied pieces of metal that will rust and decay over time, and how that can actually be something really beautiful. So just sort of some conceptual work of mine. More conceptual images, details from a project that was much larger, but playing with light and color. These right images here are actually photographs embedded in wax. So I played a lot with wax and sort of experimenting and playing with different opacity photographs using those materials. These photographs were taken from a diorama that I had built of a fictional character I had created who was a record collector. And I actually set up a peephole in the diorama. So the far left photograph is taken actually through a peephole into this fictional person's apartment. And the idea was about sort of this voyeurism, seeing through the cracks what people's lives would be like. And so I handcrafted all the furniture in there. I cut all the records, pasted artwork onto the covers, colored the spines of the records wherever they would be visible, built the chair, ottoman, light. I know that it's all very, very hard to tell what's here. I kind of don't want to show you the actual diorama. It kind of takes away some of the magic, but everything was hand done at very small scale and really kind of solidified that this is what I loved doing, small detail pieces. And then I got to do my first piece of furniture. I designed and developed this sofa and built this sofa in a master's course where it was an elective that you got to build a piece of furniture with a local manufacturer here. So this was something I designed and then went to the R&D shop, worked with the people, got the frame made, helped to upholster, and they brought my vision to life. And this was the very first time I'd ever had this experience, and it was the most thrilling thing to have happen to me, was to sort of have this thing go from a little sketch and go through the entire process and learn about upholstery and springing and foam, and learning also that it shouldn't be so large, because this thing couldn't even get into my apartment. We were moving it in and it actually like hung freely in the doorway because it was so wedged in there. So, you know, I learned that maybe taking arms off would be a good idea. So it was one project, my very first project, and I learned so much from it, and I knew for sure I wanted to work within furniture. And it's now in my mother-in-law's basement, 20 years later, getting tons of use from kids jumping all over it. And it's all stained, and I really don't care. So for the next 15 years, I did work in furniture. I worked for 3 different Canadian companies here in Winnipeg, in Toronto, and Vancouver recently, and worked in the design and development departments where I got to design products, but my main focus was developing. So bringing those designs to life, working them through the R&D process, getting them into retail stores in the end. And so I was able to work with all sorts of different furnitures within all sorts of categories. So upholstery, case goods, accessories, decor, and really wanted to do more design work. I love development work, I still do, but I was also working with freelance designers at the time, and I got to see what their process was. And I wanted to know what that was like myself. And I knew that they were, you know, almost solely focused on design, and I wanted to do that as well. So I sort of made the leap in 2018 to start Studio Marion, which is, you know, operating out of my 113-year-old 3rd floor home. And I am working with various companies on sort of a freelance basis. It's been great. So I just wanted to review some of the materials I work with, as well as some of my work over those past several years. So this includes, you know, work that I did within teams as well as on a freelance basis. Wood. I believe all designers like working with wood. It's so malleable. You can do so many things with it. Solid wood is so fun to work with because you can carve and shape it in certain ways. You can bend it even. Veneers are nice to work with too. They're so versatile. These are a couple projects I've done using all of those things. You'll see some cats pop up in this presentation. One unexpected thing that came from starting my own studio was actually doing a lot of design work for a company that sells sort of high-end cat furniture. So I have a lot of work with them, and it's been super fun and unexpected, and I've learned so much about designing for animals that I never expected to do. So you'll see some of those images pop up. So bent plywood is one of my favorite things to work with. It can create such beautiful organic curves and can create so many different looks. Metal, I've worked a lot with metal as well. I love that it's an industrial metal, an industrial material that you can turn into something that really doesn't look very industrial. You can use it in such beautiful, delicate ways. It's really fun to sort of play with finishes, sizing, polishes, sort of the details of connections to create so many different looks with metal. So this is a project I did with my friend who's a local architect in the city, who you can see walking his dog over here. Every year there's a competition here in the city, or actually in the province, and they call designers from all over the world to submit projects, and the idea is that you design a public bench that gets made somewhere in the city, somewhere in the province. And so this year, this was, I believe this was 2020, our entry was selected, and so the product was built, and we designed this sort of like kinked overlapping bench that's held together by these really soft, curvy metal, chunky pieces of metal, not too far removed from Percy, as you might be able to see some connections there. But that then held the wood planks up and enabled sort of these different opportunities of sitting privately or with people. And so that's up in the city still today. Some other projects with metal, just highlighting here. I love combining metal with upholstery. The sort of chunkier the upholstery, the better when paired with the really smooth steel. Fabrics. I've certainly worked with a lot of upholstery fabrics, which is always really fun, but these two cat projects, the fabrics became super important. On the left here, the entire project is fabric, so we had to make sure we had the right fabric to create these little sort of nesting pods for the cat. It has to be super durable. The one on the right is actually doubling as a scratching post, as well as a little sort of hideaway for a bed. For a cat. And so these panels are actually reversible, but when the fabric is on the outside, it becomes sort of like a scratching post for a cat. So it had to be very durable. It had to adhere to plywood pieces nicely. It had to be cleanable. You know, the one on the left, I believe you are able to throw in the washing machine. So there's a lot of different limitations that had to be looked at as we were working through that fabric project. I love working with glass. I want to do more glass projects, but just here highlighting one project I did. It's all the same family, as you can see, but it was done in 3 different colors. So a clear glass, a smoked gray, and a smoked brown. And I just love that the different colors, based on how the photographs are taken, how the tables are turned, you start to get shadow, light and dark spots in certain areas, really highlighting the edges. So I love glass. And this kind of took me back to one of my earlier school works where I was playing with the different colors and the transparency. So that was a really fun project. Marble, tried and true. You can't go wrong. There's a lot of other stones certainly that are being used right now, but I've had more experience with marble. It's just a classic material that I enjoy pairing with metal as well. So just a couple of projects I've done here with marble. Wool is sort of this magical material that is naturally stain resistant, naturally antimicrobial. To get it stains out, sometimes you can just leave it in the sun and it kind of like magically bleaches out. Super durable, so it's really fun to work with such a wonderful natural material. I've designed several rugs, wool rugs with wool. This one on the left sort of creating like a velvety sort of mane look, and then a very sort of knotted look on the right with lots of texture. ceramic. I've also only done a few ceramic projects, but this bowl in particular is, you know, after Percy, maybe this is one of my favorite projects I've ever done. It's just a really simple bowl for cats. And the idea with it was to sort of create this built-in, almost like spillage catcher. And so we worked to create that connection point as delicate and as fine as possible to have this bowl look like it's almost like floating on top of the plate that is actually attached to it permanently. It was a really fun, just little project to work on. Then a different bowl collection on the left with a bunch of different beautiful colors and this built-in sort of handle lip that is also for kitties. I'm gonna have a sip real quick. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my process. In school, process was really all they talked about. Process, process, process. What is your process? Capture your process, photograph your process. I want to know all about your process. And I never really understood it until, you know, starting real design work. And process is different for everybody. Obviously, you know, the order of these things varies, even for myself it does. But this is what I've found to be how I work, and really good sort of thing to keep in mind as I kick off a project. So as Stephen mentioned, a lot of projects usually start with a project brief, but sometimes they start with a spark of inspiration, and that is certainly how Percy started too. Research and inspiration. So take that spark or take that brief and start to dig into what's out there, you know, colors, forms, whatever. You start to do your research. Also, sizing is an important thing to really start to understand. Conceptualizing starts right away, whether it's through hand sketching, hand modeling, or going on to 3D modeling software. And then iterate, you iterate many, many times over. You keep trying new ways, you make mistakes, and they lead to something that you wouldn't have thought of, and then you end up kind of loving it sometimes. So iteration is obviously the hugest part of this whole process. But eventually you do need to commit, and you need to review this with somebody. So this could be proposing this to your client. This could be proposing it to somebody that is not your client, and you're just kind of wanting them to see your work, and hopefully will become a project for them. But you do need to commit and finally review, because then you go back and you refine and you detail and you draw some more iterations. And then you really have to select materials and finishes, obviously, before you get something built. Or that comes also later in the process sometimes. It also sometimes comes early in the process. I've had certain projects that kind of the impetus is a material, something I really want to work with. And so sometimes that kind of goes right at the beginning. But you do have to select, sort of commit to those materials for a little bit. Then build it however you can, get it built, build it yourself, prototype that, because you do need to sit in it. You need to see how it stands in the world, to really truly know if your dimensions and your ergonomics are correct. And then after that, again, you refine and you iterate. Hopefully it goes to manufacturing, and hopefully it launches after that, because I've had some projects go all the way up to manufacturing and then not happen. So ideally you get to the launch point. Which takes me to the Percy project, which thankfully got to the launch point. So as I just mentioned, Percy definitely began with a spark. I was in my doctor's office waiting room, sitting in just, you know, those basic comfy chairs, and just noticed the chairs had this really simple metal tube frame that just kind of like went up and followed all the way around the back and then came down. Really simple, very strong, sort of no nonsense, very robust. And I just could kind of see that if I took that little idea and turned it into some kind of chair, I felt like it could be something really interesting. So I really wanted to kind of play with tube size, play with color. Many of these waiting room chairs are very, very bland, but there's, you know, you could just tell they're kind of like this blank canvas that I wanted to sort of explore and bring to life. So I did not have this page at the time. However, I have all these loose images constantly that I keep in sort of an inspiration folder. And I had an idea of what I wanted to do. So these are some of the color palettes, textures, ideas that I was thinking about and looking at when I was designing this chair, all the way from, fashion here on the left, so that this like tone on tone color, sort of the similar color palette we're seeing down here in these very chubby chairs. My kids drawing down here, sometimes they just do these scribbles that just end up with really beautiful color combinations. This old desk in my children's school, marshmallows, this box of pipe cleaners that we still have basically unused, probably 10 years later. This railing we have here at our park nearby. And so inspiration kind of comes from anywhere. This thing here too, just sort of this fluid, uninterrupted, unending thing. I don't even know what this is. To me, it looks like a water bottle for a bike, but I'm sure it's not. So then I just started doing some hand sketches just to kind of get that idea onto paper of that uninterrupted flow of the frame, moving it into sort of different sizes and scales. I personally get into 3D modeling pretty early on because I do like to work with the actual ergonomics of the chair, the actual proportions. So I'm much better at scaling that in 3D modeling than I am through hand sketches. So I pretty early on got into my form making on 3D software. Early on, this chair was a dining chair. That was kind of my first idea, with this sort of sling, this fabric sling that would hold you. Here was an idea of this kind of veneer, sort of bent plywood veneer piece as a chair to prevent, your back getting sore. If it was just fabric. And then of course I kind of put them up on a dining chair that I had modeled as well, and the proportions just looked way off. So soon after that, I realized that this should actually be a lounge chair, and so I changed the proportions, shorter legs, added some comfy cushions, playing with what the cushion options could potentially be, and then added a little bit more support and structure for the larger scale piece as well. So this is kind of like the flow of the early days of the Percy. I never liked this high back version, by the way. Don't think I do. I just included it because it was part of the process. So from there, iterating again, how thick should these cushions be? What does this frame look like? What is necessary to support this chair? I wanted to only include what was needed. I didn't want any sort of extra fanfare, extra support. The material of the 2-inch 50mm metal leg is quite robust. And so I wanted to kind of get away with as little structure as possible. I also like keeping the sort of the singular material of the tube. So even though this cross piece here is not visible, I kept it, the same as the rest of the piece, just to really have that cohesion throughout the whole piece. And finally came to this point where I could commit, where I'm committing to this. It's time to see if this can get out there into the world. And so what I did is I applied to get into the interior design show in Toronto, excuse me. Every year they have an annual design furniture fair. It's a great show. And my favorite part of it, and I think a lot of people's favorite part of it, is this small section called prototype. And it's where uncommercialized products are shown. There's about a group, I think they usually show about like 12 to 16 products of up-and-coming designers who have built one piece and show it at this show. And so it's always a really fun way to get inspired. There's lots of wacky ideas, but there's really great ideas coming out of there. And so I applied to have Percy shown there, and they accepted it. And I was so happy to finally have an excuse and a deadline to get this chair made. So went into the refining, detailing, and drawing stage of this. And so, considering how this would be attached, you can see here I've designed some plates for the attachment, highlighting the seams, how they should flow around the chair over here, highlighting the angles, the thickness of the cushion. All of this is very important to communicate through these drawings. I needed to decide on materials and finishes. What was this going to be in? There were so many different options. Part of the reason I did the chair in metal was because I was just so excited to powder coat that any color under the rainbow. So again, sort of took this inspiration from that earlier page and really wanted to do a sort of tone on tone fabric and powder coat. And here are some fabric photographs that I took actually from a different project, but you kind of, regardless of what the project is or what inspires what, I often go back into my old folders and look up different sort of things I've done and kind of take direction from past work. So this was sort of like a collection of fabrics that I was inspired by for this project and textures. Until finally landing on this one here. And so this over here is a candle. It's this pink candle, which I still have here in my studio, but it's basically brown now. It's very, very sun faded. But this was kind of the color tone I wanted to go with. I found this great sort of multi-dimensional wool fabric and wanted to sort of pull the pink out of it there. And then so was able to find the right val color over here. So that's a powder coat swatch there paired with the fabric. And I was ready to make the prototype. And so I partnered with a local manufacturer here, a metal shop here, who has done some really great work in the city. They often do garbage cans and very industrial work. They've done a lot of park benches, but they also are always very happy to take on sort of smaller, exciting projects as well. And they were also sort of recently wanting to get into upholstery as well. So they took on this project to build this chair in very little time, I should add, because deadlines are always tight in the design world, I found. And so we began the process of building this chair to send to Toronto with this shop. Excuse me, I just need to take a little cough. Sorry about that. So this was one of the first things they showed me when I walked in that first day. When they were showing me the frame, but they walked me to this first, and I was a little bit shocked to see all these broken pieces here. So this was some tube bending that did not work. They were trying to figure out the forms for this shape and for this size of tube, which was 2 inches and quite thick certainly for furniture. So I was a little bit worried when I walked in. However, oh, I'm in the wrong slide here. There we go. However, I was reassured when they showed me the unfinished frame. And so with metal, there's a lot of things that can go wrong when you're bending such large diameters. Even small diameters, you know, you could have compression here. You've got wrinkling and crinkling. Even welding two tubes together can be a challenge. This is called coping, I believe, and it's kind of an art skill to be able to do that, to weld properly. To weld very cleanly. And so you can see a little bit of compression here, but I was very impressed at this first go through this shop. So this is sort of just like the rough unfinished frame. I believe this is the one that they did end up going all the way with. We went all the way with. The feet had not been added yet, so they had to weld on the balls for the foot bottom. But it was also, it kind of reminded me of that Big Blue Sofa time where I could see this thing come to life for the first time. So I think it was probably a week or two later, I think maybe, I don't know, even less, I got to see this piece, and they had upholstered it and powder coated it, and it was very exciting. So here I'm just highlighting sort of the spots that needed to be touched up on the frame with this yellow tape here, as well as some upholstery issues that they needed to keep working on before I sent this thing off. So this connection here, it was a very tough thing to do. Not resolved well here, so it was improved, but again, like later working with NaughtOne on resolving this nicely was a real treat. It was really fun to be able to have a beautiful solution here, which we'll see later. But basically, I saw this and the chair needed to be shipped the next day, but all these changes needed to happen. But they pulled it off and had me come back the next day. We had talked about the seam color here, so you can see like the thread match was really important. Again, sort of highlighting the path that this seam follows all the way around the edges of the chair. That was really important too. And then within 2 days, they finished it, sent it via FedEx to Toronto. in perfect condition, and it was shown here at prototype. So you can kind of get an idea of what the booth looked like. You can see that there's probably about like 16 projects here, all very varied, very varied, with Percy over here in the corner. And so the show lasts for about 4 days. About midway through, they pick one of those products from prototype, and they award it with the best prototype award. And I was so excited that Percy was awarded that year. So I got to go up on stage, and they had this giant picture back there behind me. It was overwhelming, but also very exciting. So it was a hit. People loved the color combination. People were also kind of really shocked at what the material was. So many people thought that the frame was made out of plastic or made out of metal. Every time someone came up to it, they just kind of like grabbed it and asked about it. So it was a big talking point for that part of the show. And then I brought it back home. So back in my living room, the pandemic hit. I needed to figure out what to do with this chair. I felt very strongly that it should go into production somehow. I took photographs of it, had my friend take some great photographs of it, so properly document the thing, and looked into potentially having it made myself, potentially with the shop that had done the prototype. I was kind of willing to maybe take this venture into my own hands and get this thing out into production myself. But thankfully, MillerKnoll was interested in the chair. At the time, it was Herman Miller. As Stephen mentioned, there was a lot of things going on at that time, but also the merger of Herman Miller and Knoll happened at that time as well. So there was a lot of sort of variables as to whether or not this was going to happen. And eventually MillerKnoll thought that this would be well suited within the NaughtOne family. And I agree. And I did know NaughtOne for many years in the furniture industry. And so I was excited to have Percy kind of land within that family. The colors that they use, the forms, the shapes, it's playful, it's fun. I think that everyone can probably see that Percy feels probably pretty at home within this product collection. So it was very exciting to sort of find out that this was going to happen. I also really felt aligned with NaughtOne with their CSR statement and how they work, offering good warranties. They manufacture everything locally wherever possible, as local as you can get, that is, and offering a take-back program that clients can return the products back to NaughtOne so they can be recycled properly. So there's a lot more in here, but I felt very, very proud that this was going to go to a company that cared so much about being sustainable. One of the first things I got to do then with NaughtOne was try some different color options with this chair. I had really only seen it in the pink, and so I took the RAL colors that NaughtOne offered. I added some of my own, and then rendered Percy many, many times with various fabric options that they also carry. So these are their real colors and real fabrics wherever possible. So it was a really fun thing to do, and there were more than this, but just showing you a couple. One of the first things that we wanted to do once we sort of came back and were refining this chair now for NaughtOne was closing up the gap at the back of the chair, which had kind of opened up during the prototyping phase. And we agreed that it looks much better with it closed back. So that just was a matter of kind of moving the leg up a little bit to close that gap. Another thing that we explored was stacking. Could this frame change to become stacking? Stacking, as you can imagine, just makes production easier, shipping easier, but it actually opened that back up again. So as you can see, I had to move the leg to the back of the frame to allow for the stacking to happen and not overlap. But what resulted was this huge gap in the back, and we decided that didn't look great. We certainly preferred the original. More legs kind of moved around. Here you can see, I mean, it's hard to see, but we were playing with the placement of the front as well as the back legs, kind of moving them off the radius a little bit. It's much easier, and sort of structural wise, it's better to have your wells a little bit further from the radius. And so we moved those in, which I think changed the look of it, and really like the new position. You can also see the plates that are very basic, and what I had designed from the beginning remained. Turns out they're just a really simple and quite strong way to secure this seat very discreetly. Here we're looking at the frame itself. So this plywood frame, very, very simple, obviously. And then the foam set, so testing out different foams to see what type of thickness we were wanting, as well as what comfort level we're working with. With the move into sort of commercial product, it's really important that this chair pass so many different tests, so many different performance tests. And so the foam needs to be of certain quality, the frame needs to be of a certain quality. And so we were really making sure that it was going to withstand much more use than if it was in a residential setting. The domed foot was something we certainly talked about. The radius, had to change a little bit to get it just much smoother. The original prototype I had no little feet at the bottom of it, so I was worried about scratching the floor. Had not come up with a solution at that point. So excited when NaughtOne was already working with this company that had these biodegradable, basically invisible little feet that they could just pop right into the ends there, to give it exactly sort of the softness that it needed on the floor and to protect the floors, but it be basically not visible whatsoever. So that was a really good little solution that was quite simple. The welds on this chair are very, very important. Obviously, they're kind of one of the main features of this chair. So NaughtOne worked very hard to find the right supplier and manufacturer to be able to achieve the quality of welds that were necessary. So this is just showing some beautiful welds. I just am so happy with how this turned out. That's all. Just excited about these welds. Here we are refining the cushion. So here you can see this connection is much nicer than it was before. NaughtOne kind of figured out this way to sew, I believe, the top and the seat fabric together all in one piece and have this beautiful little zipper, just kind of like zip it all up in the end. And it's a very clever way of doing it. This photograph is actually just showing the distance. How much does the cushion kind of like peek up against the frame? So we're looking at like millimeters of change just to get it just right, just the right amount of kind of puff and overflow into the frame. And then another exciting moment when I got to go to Chicago and to see the preview of Percy. So this is what the little area looked like that was showing Percy. 3 chairs were made up, and it was really great to be able to see them and once again refine. And so talk about some of the things that we kind of need to do just for those final little touches before it goes into production. One of the things that we discussed was this seam placement. And so I felt like it was riding a little too high. So we just kind of moved it down, even just like 5 or 10 millimeters. And then here is kind of the results. You can see it's kind of like tucked in closer to the frame here. So just tiny little details, all that have to get discussed and talked about and have photos flying back and forth to get things kind of just right. I'm so happy with the changes. So as I mentioned, NaughtOne has such a great CSR statement and looked on sustainability. And so with each of their products, they provide these sheets that tell you, the percentage of what's recyclable, what is recycled product, what the materials are, its footprint, what the standards are. And so I love that they just really break it down for you. And so it was really cool to see how Percy breaks down. I think that I personally had never designed anything that I got to see this breakdown. So it was really interesting for me to see. And then finally, Percy goes into manufacturing. So these are just a couple screenshots from a little video that is being made about the manufacturing and development of Percy. And so it's very exciting for me to see this on the table getting made. Yeah, not much to say except I like these shots. And then for the launch, they prepared some really beautiful marketing materials. So for all of their products, they have these beautiful little books that they create. And this is just a sample of the Percy book and some of the beautiful photography that was done for it in preparation for the launch, which I'm sure that some of you have already seen by now. And then this, one of my favorite photos as well, which Stephen has also shared with you. And the last thing I'll show you is something I just added to the presentation because it's so cute. As soon as we got, so I sent the chair to Michigan after prototype. And then, you know, I don't know how long after, 2 years later, we got the box back with the new NaughtOne version in it. And we set it up in the living room and we were all so excited. And my 6-year-old pulled up an easel and immediately started drawing the chair the day we got it. And this is the final result of his drawing, which I thought was so cute. So this chair is meaningful to myself and my family as well. And I couldn't be happier that it has found its home with NaughtOne. And that is all. Thank you.
So Nicole, thank you. And thank you, Stephen. What an amazing presentation. Thank you for putting that together for us. You know, I don't know if you were able to see them, but along the way, lots of hearts popping up and really well done and hands clapping. You also in chat, you had several people are also from Winnipeg, and
Awesome.
so I also thought your images were really stellar of Winnipeg. I enjoyed the sort of the big sky and green fields in the summertime, and then the you know, the winter the warming huts were also amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so we've got some questions for you. I'm scrolling through chat here. So comments about Winnipeg. I love that. And then, so Kimberly asked, and I think you may have spoken about this to some degree, but how did you initially connect with manufacturers, studios to produce your product designs? And this question was asked earlier on. I think before you even started talking about MillerKnoll and NaughtOne, you were maybe, you know, talking about some of your glass products or your the cat products.
Yeah, so some of the projects that I showed were projects that I designed and developed while I was working for the various Canadian companies. So I was an employee. And so different projects would just come and you would kind of take them on depending on what sort of category you were working in. But then since doing working for myself and working with Studio Marion, it's a matter of sort of reaching out to the connections that I had made. Sometimes like people who I know people and they hear I'm kind of out on my own now, and then projects come my way. But also it's a bit of a hustle. You kind of have to, you know, reach out to people and kind of show your work and try to make these connections to get these projects. Yeah.
So you're not just designing, you're developing business along the way, right? That
is true. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So the next question is about your cat furniture, which I think everybody loved. So is the cat furniture part of Marion's studio? So I think the question is that something that you're designing for yourself and producing, or is that for another company you're designing for?
So I'm super allergic to cats. I do not
Me
have
too.
any cat furniture. But no, that is for all that work was done on a freelance basis, but from a company called Tufton Paw. They're based in Vancouver, and they have such a beautiful collection of cat furniture. And so that was an example of sort of like a friend of a friend of a friend needed a designer, and that they reached out to me shortly after I started my studio. So those projects were one of the first ones that I did after starting Studio Marion. And I've been like really thankful to get those projects because I learned so much. And they also have beautiful photography, so it's always fun to use those shots in my presentation.
Yeah, perfect. So I'm scrolling down. We only have a couple minutes left. And one of the questions, and this is actually a question I had, you, Stephen, showed a lot at the beginning with color, some of the showroom spaces, right? You obviously, Nicole, focused a lot on color. So there was a question here, I'm trying to find it, about color. Now oh, here. How did you decide on what color combos to show at NeoCon? So many possibilities, right? And so to me, like part of that was going through my mind as well. I mean, you know, Nicole, you had a clear color direction and palette in mind, and you showed us a lot of your inspiration. Stephen, you're working on a broader color story for NaughtOne. So when it comes together in a showroom or even literature, how do you know, like, how do you know what to show? And I think that question is for both of you.
Do you want me to answer that, Nicole?
Yes, please.
I think it's pretty simple actually, because it's like we had 3 chairs. So how do you tell the stories that we wanted to tell in 3 chairs, right? So it's like we wanted one chair that was dressed up, one chair that was more casual, one chair that was vibrant, like to show the breadth of all the spaces you could put the chair, like how it can change character, right? So that drove what that selection was. So we're trying to tell those stories. And I would say even when we are looking at the marketing material, and you know, we had versions early on of the Percy chair on the cover of the booklet that had a white frame and it looked beautiful, but it's like no, like the chair has to be this great, you know, vessel of color. Like
it's about color,
like we're, you know,
right?
so it's like we got to go orange, you know. So
yeah,
actually, like when you're tied to a concept and you know what you need to communicate about the chair, those decisions get really easy. And then we have a really talented team at MillerKnoll that help put our showrooms together, and great designers that come in and interpret that intent, which they did a wonderful job for us at NeoCon.
Well, being based in Chicago, I have the good fortune of using that space and working out of that space when I want. So it is a beautiful environment that has been created. So congratulations on that. So we're about at time, and we have a very simple question. Our last question, I'll put it out there to both of you to answer in like 10 words or less. What are you working on next?
Stephen, you go ahead.
I can't tell you. But you know, when we did go into this project with Nicole, we think the world of her work and the design and the success of Percy, and we're excited about continuing that partnership.
Good. Well, I think that's wonderful. We certainly hope to see more of Nicole's work at NaughtOne or any of our brands, quite frankly. So this was an amazing presentation. Thank you to both Nicole, thank you to Stephen, and thank you to our audience for tuning in to Design Perspectives. Have a good month, everyone, and we will see you in February. So thank you again, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.